it's time for Germany to head west and move into the strategic warfare segment. Now, the rules as written allow me to shift my fleet here anywhere, pretty much, in the Atlantic without an interception chance. In particular, the Bismarck scenario doesn't make sense because France has already fallen at that point. In this game, the Germans in that condition could have, this has nothing to do with the current situation, but they could have dropped themselves off at Bray, and then they avoid the penalty for if they're coming out of France for that fleet up in Scapa Flow. Now, right now, that's why I'm withholding the fleet, is because I would have to do a Bismarck-like breakout scenario, which only has a 50% chance of getting my ship out here to try and do damage. But later, it's going to be a 1 in 6 chance of being caught. I'm going to be continuously raiding English shipping. It just bugs the crap out of me, the amount of things like that in this game. But what I do have is I have this U-boat here, and that I can use. That U-boat is going to fire on the one table. Right? No, there's two. I may have cheated last time and not given myself the points, but they do no damage to the Allied production. I've seen some people claim the morale system is completely broken too, and I have to agree you can break English morale pretty easily, and I think you can actually break German morale easier. You can bomb them out of the game, as it were. Okay. So now we go to the movement phase, and I'm just going to be shifting my forces. I want to take the Low Countries out at the same time as I take France. The hell with Denmark. With those 2 extra strength points, there's no way I'm going to take that. I have trouble enough taking Denmark and Norway and the Low Countries in most of the historical games. You know, your Advanced Third Reich, I think I managed it in Third Reich, but in Axis Empires I couldn't manage it. I just couldn't figure out how to get reasonable odds and hit all these things at once. That early attack was just too difficult. I may not be able to take France in this turn. I need a turn to push my way through once I hit the Low Countries. But I'm going to be shifting all my troops around in order to optimize my attack west. Okay, so now with the Germans, I've basically thrown everything on the line here. This is somewhat dangerous. The Russians could reach Berlin. I must build units to defend Berlin. But the units up here didn't particularly protect Berlin. If the Russians launch an attack against Germany and take Berlin, it doesn't really make much difference whether or not there were some armies that I passed by. There's nothing like zones of control in this game. You control the hex you're in, and some people see that as a big problem with the game in that they can't really control a front in the Soviet Union. The line sometimes permeates in such a way where you can't defend the whole line. I actually see that as kind of an interesting factor and a limitation on the Germans' ability to simply push their way through and crush to a victory at all times. We'll see when Barbarossa happens what's going to happen there. But I do damn well have to remember that I have to launch this. I chose not to try to break out with my fleet. The movement of pieces is really just shifting the numbers around here. You can move them all around to any degree you want. I've got 2 major armies here, the 4th Army and the North Army. The North Army's plan is to go bonk, 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 bonk. The 4th Army is going to try to come up, over, and hit this army. We're going to bypass the fort here. That's my plan. But we'll see what the defensive setup is. It's not forced. So for the Low Countries, they get 2 strength points plus a fort permanently in 09. Now the fort, I don't know what to do with. So I'm going to use a U.S. fort there. If the Low Countries survive this turn, well, they will. Well, no, not necessarily. If they manage to survive, however, somehow, although they won't have any supply for this fort, that would become allied anyway, so it's not that big a deal. But what about the other 2 strength points? I got a couple of options. This doesn't really increase defenses too much, whereas this is pretty potent as a defense for that fort. Now those remain low country strength points no matter what. They're never going to be able to be incorporated in an army, if I recall correctly. Yeah. Of course, that leaves this more open, but it makes this hex more defensible. With only one strength point of fort there, that really wasn't any more defensible than a blank hex, so the 4th Army could have just moved in there. All right, so my initial attacks, the 4th Army is going to attack this hex, and the North Army is going to attack this hex. That's my plan. The 4th Army is actually attacking a German hex. That should be trivial to get into. Let's start with the North Army first. It's got 6 armor, and I'm going against a defense of 1. So on a 1 through 6, I make it in. And that hex has just been devastated, as well as captured. Now, the next thing I have to do is this. The 4th Army has 5 armor against a friendly hex that goes in on a 1 through 8. And it does not devastate its own production. Okay. Now I get my second moves for these. I want to attack with the North Army first because it has more armor. And again, I don't want to waste my assault here. So I've got 6 armor against a 1. It's a 1 through 6, but I won't make it on a 6 because I've already moved a hex. Okay. I do not get terribly unlucky there. Shit. I didn't want to do it in this order. Oh well. See, this is why I wanted this hex, because then they could have converged to attack there. The 4th Army as my follow-up, I don't think that's going to make it to Paris. I made a screw up there. I'm going to let it stand. I should have tried to get the 4th Army into play, but since there was a die roll, I'm not going to take it back. That would have been a 5 against a 1. I would have needed a 1 through 4 to get into place. But I have to continue with this unit, and I'm not going to get past the French 1st Army unless I attack it. So I'm declaring that I'm attacking that, and I'm going to be using my assault, but very obviously it too is going to be using its assault. At this point, it does its defensive assault first. It's got a tack air, and it'll commit that tack air against my 5 tack air. That's the first part of the assault. That'll be a firepower table of 1 on that. I don't have enough tack air to exceed what the Germans have, and I don't do anything. Now I have 10 points of firepower coming at the German army, and that's a nice big meaty table there. I get a 4. You know, I didn't draw generals here. Let me see if I would have had one. 3, 9. I would have had a general there. Let me draw for an allied general to affect this. I forgot to do that during my build phase last time. But that's clearly my most important space, so I would have seen that. Speaking of which, actually, since I've already made advances with these guys, I have Rommel in the North Army, so he had no chance of failure. And there was no leader for the 4th Army, so that's removed. Okay. So that's the Allied Army. And, hey, we got Patton there. Don't worry about him. He's Patton. The nationality of the leaders doesn't matter. That's just unimportant. So I rolled a 4. That gets me a 3. I'm going to do 3 hits on the North Army. Well, luckily for the Germans, they have enough infantry in that they're not losing any of their power. And that's one of the things you want to do. It's very attractive to say, put 10 armor in an army because it can move wherever it likes and it can get quite far. Well, first time it hits something that's got any strength to it, it's going to lose important armor points, and armor costs more, as well as being more effective than the infantry. That was the French counterattack there. Now the Germans, Rommel has to launch his attack here. The first thing I have is my air attack. I'm only going to use the 1 point of tack air, I think, because I want to get that hex as much as I can. 1 point of attack error gives me a 1 point on the firepower table. I've got the -1 for Rommel though. And that's enough to kill. I think he counts towards air. I don't remember. You know, leaders are an optional rule, so it'll be mentioned here, not back there. Okay. The leader marker is kept face down. If it's a leader, it may begin to influence the army's attacks with that very attack. If it's no leader, it goes back in. I don't think they give real rules on this. Anytime the army suffers casualties, though, the leader has to roll a die. So it's actually possible Rommel could have died in that counterattack. And yes, I believe he did. 6 was... Where the hell did I... A 6 forces the loss of the leader. So Rommel goes back in the pile. He'd have to come back out. And actually, since I needed him for that attack error, I put that there. Okay. But now I get my main air fight, which is going to be... I've got my main assault. I have 11 points, including the 4 attack error, to try to get rid of that 10. I'll be using 2 die rolls. First on the 10, where I cause 2 hits. So I cause a grand total of 2 infantry hits. The defender gets to choose what he's losing in the situation. You always take infantry. Well, it's possible you have amphibious you want to kill off instead. I don't know why. Well, this doesn't look good. I don't think I'm going to get the hex. The North Army now has 6 armor against a total of 8 strength points. Remember, the air don't count. So I look, and no, I'm not going to get an attack. So the North Army is done. And now I get to move the 4th Army. The 4th Army has 5 armor. Going into a friendly hex is 1 to 8, but I've moved 1 hex, so it's only 1 to 7. I am allowed to do this. I'm overstacked right now, but that's okay. I must try to get out. Well, I'm going to try to get out. I'm going to try to get out in this hex. No defensive assault this time because the French already used theirs up, but I have a 10-point assault on the French First Army. I get a nice big hit doing 4 damage, and I may actually have a chance. There's 4 remaining units there. I've only got 5 armor. 5 armor to 4 units. I'd need a 1. I've moved a couple of hexes. I can't advance. Thus, I remain overstacked. No penalty to this. It's just I would have to try to clear that overstacking as soon as possible. So right now, actually, I'm over... this would be a harder hex to take. But to its advantage, the casualties against it are... it's still only allowed to fire 10 points of ground units out of it, I believe. But the biggie is it can take a lot more damage before it's forced to withdraw, which is kind of weird. So I failed, although I did take this hex and I forgot to mark it. And now I've got to go to my production. It is tough. You can see I threw everything in. I made a screw up, but it's tough, you know, to take things that were historically taken in this game, i.e. impossible to follow the timeline. So now I'm going to do my production, and again, I don't want to do that on the board any more than I want to do, although it might give you some hints as to how to best manage things, any more than I want to do the reorganization of the strength points. That's how I spent my points. I threw 4 points into the OKW Army group, which is in Berlin. This should be sufficient to prevent the Russians from attacking. Basically, my look at that is a 4 strength point he's got 3 hexes penalty. He'd have to have like 9 armor to have, or 8 armor to have like a 1 in 6 chance of getting in there, basically. Is that worth it? Well, obviously, the Russians would attack here under the way the rules are written. And I couldn't find anything in the errata about that, but with what I've modified it as, there's a heavy penalty to attacking into Germany, and you don't want to just take it. And maybe I'll put a little marker here. This is getting... Now that I also spent 6 points fixing the production, so now I have an 18-point production. I spent the other 2 points. I could have bought another infantry to be more secure, but I spent the other 2 points on tech. And now I'm up here, and I have a 50-50 chance of getting something from a tech roll. I'm not going to take it. But only on a 1 or a 2 would I get the next level, which in the case of what I picked here, mech... Oh, I forgot U-boat. U-boat might be worth looking at. Yeah, U-boat goes down $2 if I get it. But if I get a B, mech would go down $0.50 to 3.5, and U-boat would go down to a 5. So I want to make sure that I get the levels, and in some extent, maybe I'll wait and see if the allies in their various types reach my level, in which case at least I can, I don't know, that doesn't actually matter. It's only if they surpass it that I have to really worry, and I'm not expecting that to happen anytime soon until Germany's really on the edge of losing. But this hex is not cut off. Doesn't matter, it doesn't go away if it is. This hex is owned by me. I could mark that, you know, with one of these, just because unlike Poland, we're actually in the effect there. And now we move on to the Ruski turn. Okay, so for the Russians, they basically have nothing to do except build up their technologies at this point. They can build troops instead. I pumped a couple of points into each of my technologies, and I also bought myself an extra infantry because I had 3 extra points left over. What do I do with 3 points? I could invest in other technologies. What might I want? Well, that's the real issue here. Do I want, say, the A-bomb? Now, what's weird with the technology is the 2 research modifications explained in rules 2 and 3. 1 production point per turn, and the improving chance of research if someone's better than you don't apply if you have trying to think of how to put this. If you have if you're at prohibited levels, like you are with the missile, with the bomber, escort, the bomber, the A-bomb. If I spent the points on the A-bomb, though, first of all, I have to get it up to level 6 to be able to build one. And secondly, in addition to building one, I'd have to get, say, my strategic bombers or my missiles up to a functioning level to be able to get them. Missiles are actually better to deliver them, but it's tough to deliver them to Berlin, which is where I'd want to drop an A-bomb, because that would conquer Germany. At this point in the game, I'm not sure what the total production points are, because the Allies have 23, but the Russians, I've got them listed at 9, but they have more than 9 under their control right now. In order to win the game, let's see if campaign 2 gives the victory conditions. No. In order to win the game, you go back to here. The Soviets have to have basically 3-2 to get the substantial victory out of the total. They have to have actually more victory locations than anyone else. Now, if I can get 1-1, that's pretty good too. But if I quickly count, and you know, we're assuming Barbarossa doesn't happen while I'm developing the bomb, right? So that doesn't seem like a valid building plan. And most of the other things don't really help me in any sense of the word. I'm not terribly worried about the Germans strategic bombing me. I'm worried about them invading me. I need ground troops. I don't have anywhere to put those 3 extra troops that's going to help me militarily in the face of Barbarossa. So, that's one of the things with this game. It gives you all this ability to, follow different pathways and such not. But the truth is, you can't really afford to take them, at least not with the Soviets. With the Western Allies, you do have some opportunity to try to aim for, say, an atomic bomb attack to finish Germany off. The problem is, usually you don't want to do it because you need to conquer more of Germany. Otherwise, the Soviets end up winning. You don't get as big a victory as you might get if you actually take the territory. So in a lot of cases, you just don't want to go off the rails too much in terms of these what-if type circumstances. Germany is probably the country who has the most ability because they're just trying to defeat everyone else. And there you're looking at how do you best improve your survival. And with my kind of, the possibility of a sea line, the possibility of developing different weapons strategies and stuff, all these things kind of add up to a little bit more ability to play than the other players probably have. Anyway, what I ended up doing was boosting these. Now the question is, do I want to make rolls for them? My roll here is 5 out of 6. I'm going to get the advantage because with infantry and mech, the Germans are at a higher tech level than I am. They have a lower base value than I do. So that's appealing. However, there is the thought that if I raise my tech to the German level, then they can pump points into their tech. Of course, it means more to me to have infantry than it means to the Germans. And honestly, I need to get my mechs in competitive basis as well. I need to be able to build up a reserve of mechs at some point. And if I'm going for those, I probably want to roll for the TAC Air too, even though, again, that makes it cheaper perhaps for the Germans to get these. But once Germany takes France out, they have their options of what do they want to do. Do they want to invade the Soviets or do they want to concentrate on Great Britain? But if, at some point or another, they're going to have a big force to hit me with, I need to have my defenses up. And I'm concentrating on that one thing. I'll probably get away cheaper than the Germans will. So let's roll. First for mechs. I get a 4, which is a success. And so I was at the 6th level. That means I'm going to go to tech level 1, which is a 4. And I just mark that with this. My current cost for mechs is down now. Even more important perhaps is the infantry. And I get away with that. That goes from 3 down to 2 according to the charts. And I'm going to take my shot at TAC Air as well. This is something that's more of a nice to have for me. So if I don't get it down to 3, at least I get it to 3.5. Actually, no, it's either 3 or nothing. And in fact, I succeed there. The reason it's either 3 or nothing or the Germans are ahead, so B's count as A's. So I've gotten nice successes on all my tech rolls. Well, Germany's kind of happy about that in their own way. Although, I mean, it's always a balance. They're happy about it in the sense that they're going to be able to build these things more easily. It's not going to improve their chances of rolls, but they can pump more points into them and then increase their own tech. Overall, though, for Russia, they're not just fighting Germany. They have to fight the Allies as well. Not directly, but they have to beat the Allies to German territory. All right, on to the Allies, and they've got an interesting defensive position here that I have to consider how they best want to try to hold France. I don't think they can do it another turn, but they can make it very costly on the Germans. In terms of costly on the Germans, you have to kind of think about it. This is the spring 40 turn. I think it's not until winter 40 that I can start building forts. Not that I really want to, because I'm under pressure right now. It's hard to build fortresses when you're at war, when you're pushing in a certain area, because they don't count. They'll be on your line, but they can fall then. So the Allies have this kind of troubling question of how much to commit to France. I've already committed the infantry there. That's fine. That doesn't really cost me much. But the more effort I commit to defending something that's going to fall eventually, what I may be doing is trimming the ground capabilities of the Axis, ground capabilities that are going to be turned against the Soviet Union. I like to do it anyhow, but I could see some players deciding to give up France easily because maybe they think they can defend Britain. Although I feel like in this game, if the Germans concentrate on Britain, they can knock them out of the war. Unfortunately, that may or may not mean much. All right. I'm going to take a break. Crappies. I always forget. This is the turn where Italy enters the game for production. So I actually have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more production points. By the way, this is in supply through the Mediterranean because Italy can trace at this point. What did I say? I can't remember when I count. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 additional production. I also always forget to pull my leaders, and so I'll have to do that as well because I've gotten rid of all my leaders, so I'm going to get a new fresh batch. Remember, Rommel's back in the pile in case I want him. Alright, I'll go back in time, fix those things. So I bought myself an armor, which I threw in the OKW again to protect Berlin itself. Often, once you're actually at war with Russia, you're building your stuff back here because this is the important space. At this point in the game, though, I figured that's what I was defending before, and it'll help prevent a Russian attack, even though I didn't make it already. And I threw points into my TAC air, and then 2 points into bomber. I couldn't throw extra points into the things that I only put 1 point in, even though Russia's matched that by now. This is prior in time. I still haven't drawn my leaders. On to the midst of my allied player turn planning. I've moved all the troops from the 3rd Army up to the front here. I may actually end up leaving some mechanized units back, pushing them back to the 3rd Army as a reserve. Because they will be lost if Paris is lost, but why risk them up here? But I've got a really nice block here. I'm going to leave the Belgian fort, essentially, in place there. That's not doing me any harm right now. The problem I have is I want to shift the English 8th Army into place over here. And I'm going to send that by sea, and you can basically transfer indefinite amounts of space. But the problem is, I remember there's a U-boat rule where they're able to shoot at these. And I want to find that to make sure it's not once per hex. I don't think it is. And of course, with these damn rules, I can't find where it is. It's not in the U-boat attack section that I can find. Maybe it's over here in these optional rules. I mean, you know, the game's not that complicated to begin with if they hadn't done this stupid programmed instruction. The programmed instruction is great for one thing, the Barbarossa scenario. You can get up and get that playing real quick. You know what would have been cool? Make one big rule book for the base game. Probably by not repeating and retracting things, they could make a little quick start game that covered most of this. But with the changing naval rules being pushed back and forth and such not. And to tell you the truth, the Barbarossa scenario doesn't introduce anything too terribly wrong either. So they should have stopped there and just thrown all the optional rules and everything else into one set. But I'll grant you this. The second campaign game onward starts getting significantly more complex. But that's where the rules get retracted, etc. So, you know, I'm going to have to spend 15, 20 minutes trying to find the damn rule that I know exists. And because it's scattered all over the rule book, you know, different factors are in different places based on the, hey, which set of rules are you using, rather than some kind of coherent organization. You end up having to pay this cost in the organization of the rule book that's higher than most games. some games beat it out. Some things that are not programmed instruction have managed to do just as badly as PI does, but PI is such a fucking awful idea. I'll tell you what works better than PI and provides the same advantages is scenarios that are, hey, play this first and ignore these rules and add these, factors to it. So like the naval rules for the campaign game 1, you could have a simplified game of that. Just have that on a separate sheet, which things you ignore, which things you replace there. That way, add the burden to the people who actually need the stupid PI, who want to play through and work their way through, rather than, once you get to the game as it was meant to be played and it's full, not having a reference book that can handle it. The rules under transatlantic shipping, and it only applies to the transatlantic shipping. It's a reasonable place for it, but... So I want to get these guys here to defend Alexandria. Actually, I could shift them here a little forward, giving me room to fall back a hex, rather than lose Alexandria right away. And because I don't think these two are adjacent. It's so hard to tell. For example, these two are adjacent, it looks like, so you could just invade Denmark pretty easily. Tricky. Pain in the ass there. All right. So for my builds, I'm going to spend 7, or I'm going to build 7 infantry. That's going to give me 20. That's going to cost me 21 points. I got 2 more points to spend. That is stuff I'm going to spend on air defense, which has a cost, so I can only move that up 1. Well, actually, I could move that up 2. I'll do that. And the other thing, I've got 1 more point to spend. 1 point isn't going to do me a whole hell of a lot. Probably my most advantageous thing would be to throw it into TAC air, I think. Although infantry could be very helpful to me to building up the 8th Army. I've got worries that the African army is going to be able to hit me. I don't have enough force in the 8th Army to really push anywhere. I've only got 2 strength points there. You know what? I'm just worried about a push for North Africa at this point. I hate doing this, but I'm going to reduce a strength point out of the French builds that I made for the turn. And I'm going to put that strength point over with the 8th Army. These are out of builds because I'm going to dedicate these. So I'll move 2 points here and 3 out of here. So that goes to 4. This is the kind of thing you got to do, and that goes to a full up 10 army. That means the Germans could attack this hex, but that doesn't gain them anything. I've put all my strength here, and I've still got the west wall here. I do have a worry about an attack coming out of Italy, though. Oh, shit. That's something I can't really cope with. And I'll have to shift the French fleet back here. I may have to reposition because I'm very worried about an attack coming from the south breaking my line. That would be pretty easy. So I will shift those around again so that the main force is on the Paris. Another option would be to put the block here. But this still becomes a weak spot. So I may have to perform some balancing act there. I'll think about that a little bit. I don't want to do that online. It takes more thought than I can do just while I'm videoing and chattering. Since I had legitimate production spaces in either of these spaces, I can basically rearrange the troops in France as I like. I could have set some up during movement and then built the rest. So, rather than following the sequence of play absolutely, I fudged things a little bit after seeing what I want to do. But there were no die rolls or anything. The French First Army could have attacked here, but with 2 armies sitting there, I'm not getting anywhere, and I'd be giving first fire to the Germans, which I don't want to do. They're going to have to rectify this overstacking during their movement phase. They're not going to get some kind of advantage where they have 2 units in place right at the beginning of the turn. So that's they're going to have to advance into this space or here if they want to push forward. This is the split I took, basically with the predominance of the force up here, because even if I take a hit and I'm forced to retreat then, with the advanced table, there'll be something to defend Paris, whereas this guy can also fall back. So I'm presenting the Germans with a really painful, or the Axis as a whole, with a painful advance. This is what happens if France doesn't fall on one turn, or more specifically, if I don't take the Calais hex or whatever in the first turn. It's going to be tough to knock France out, and this is going to cost me stuff that I need perhaps for the Barbarossa. Now, overall, that may be best for the Russians rather than the Western Allies. It's hard to tell, but, from some sort of, I don't know, storyline type aspect, just giving up France in order to maybe make things harder on the Soviets for longer, that's a really tough thing to agree to do. Plus, France is worth, what, some 7 production points. So, maybe Germany's not going to take France. It's more likely, though, the Soviets will not attack the Germans for the simple fact that, unless they can win the game off of it right away, but for the simple fact that, hey, what's the advantage, Let the Germans take France and wear themselves out on a powerful France, and then I will move forward. So it's kind of an interesting, just interesting decisions across the board. There becomes a strong disincentive to attack the Germans while they're taking France out, because that's a big chunk of the Allied production. And if you knock out all the German production with an attack on Berlin, you can win the game. But if France is still in the game, maybe not. Which makes this one of the few games where the Russians kind of want to make the Ribbentrop alliance in game terms, even if they don't actually negotiate it or anything. They actually kind of do want it. I should put a little Soviet flag marker here in the Baltic states, I guess. I don't know. It's pretty clear seeing as I'm sitting on the capital there, I guess. All right. Well, let's see if I can push the next turn into play. I got to count my leaders and see if I'm probably due another one there. All right, lots of big decisions for the Germans, but let's open up with their strategic warfare. I get nothing. Now, when I say lots of big decisions, and this goes back to port, although it doesn't really cost anything to keep sending it out. When I say lots of big decisions, what I mean is, where do I launch my attack on France? And do I want to try for Alexandria? That's a production point, and then there's the 2 in India that I don't get, but at least I deprive them of the Allies, which could be a tremendous bonus there. Yeah, the U-boats aren't going to affect morale, unfortunately. Which is a little weird because Britain could have been starved out by them. Like I said, I think there's some question on the morale rules. So I've got this space which is closest. If I launch an attack, basically I have a lot of things to worry about. If I launch an attack from this space into here to capture it, well, I've got a bigger force that I have to reduce, 9 strength points there. Whereas the Third Army down on the Italian border only has 7 strength points, but then I have to advance more spaces. I think it probably is easier to launch the attack out of here, but the problem with that is I'm coming through a mountain hex, so I can only really use 1 unit to launch that attack. Whereas from here, I could pull this other unit back here The reason is because there's a penalty to moving through the mountains. That may not be a huge deal. Let's say I launch the attack into the mountains. I would need, it's a friendly hex, I would need 5 armor to push into this hex without any problem. I have a good deal of armor. I have 7, 12, 13 available to me right now. So I could probably afford to have 2 armies hitting from here as well. Either one of those is an interesting option then. Of course, if I fail here, and I don't, if I pull these units out of here and fail in my attack from the south, then I have a problem in terms of actually, I've got a big army sitting right near my border that could conceivably actually make it to Berlin if I don't build defenses either in Berlin or in these 2 hexes. I can't build them in the Low Countries simply because that's not part of Germany, even if I don't have production there either, so that's not an issue. Anyhow, but you can't build outside your home country. Another issue that I have to worry about is the Italian army. I have to keep, 4 infantry and an armor, not necessarily in the Italian army, but in Italy, or Italian allied territory. And I could start with units there. They can advance out of there, but then I would have to build up that army again inside Italian territory. That might not be such a terrible thing. Then again, it might not be great. If I'm using not the Italian army, though, here to help with the attack, then I could leave a German army, or, without that attack penalty sitting down there, and that wouldn't be so terrible, and then I could launch the attack. So I think that's what I'm going to aim for, is an attack from the south and an attack into Egypt at the same time. That can gain me a lot of advantages here. What I can't do, what I'd love to do, there's nothing in Britain. There's 1 amphibious unit here which does absolutely nothing because it's the same as a garrison. I'd love to invade Britain, but I have no way to do so. I have no amphibious units and no paratroopers. Now, all units are general, in the game, everything's free to inspect. So you're not going to pull any surprises here with your units. And that's actually kind of important because the Brits obviously couldn't have pumped all these troops into France. All right, so we'll go with my plan to come from the south and see if we can also take Alexandria at the same time. Well, take the Suez. I don't know if we need both hexes of the Suez. We probably can't get both. The problem with this Suez Canal rule is I have absolutely no idea where to find it. Oh, excellent. D15. Yeah, that's the Alexandria hex. Great. That's all I need to take to blockade it. I thought it was, but I wanted to make sure. Okay, so this is the setup I've chosen to go with. An army of the south down here. This is going to be a reserve unit. There's no capital to Italy. Italy surrenders when 3 mainland hexes are taken. The 4th army is going to be my main bludgeoning force, but I want to get this one up there first. Unfortunately for me, I'm still going to have to launch my attack with the 4th army on the 3rd. What have I distributed for them? A lot of armor and air power in the 4th army. I want to destroy that French army so that I have a decent chance of making it to Paris. The 4th army, the South army down here, sort of a mixture enough to get me into the... I got a penalty in the mountains. Shit, did I count that in? 5? Yes, I did. Okay. Now, I've also got Panzer Army Africa down here, and notice I don't have an Italian army, but that's legal right now, and if I can keep the South Army in this hex, I won't have to build more units. I will have to build up here in Berlin to prevent the Ruskies from just marching in and taking it. But this is just a big infantry army. I'm hoping to blast through here, and then I can go into a 0 hex on a 1 through 4. I'm not going to get Alexandria, but I can push closer with what's basically a big Italian infantry army, and then force the Brits to really reinforce heavily. They're going to lose everything in France if I win this. If I don't win this, this is bad. In fact, I could actually pull units out of France at this point, because not that I want to, because I think France has a chance of surviving. During the Allied turn, I could have pulled out because there are no Axis units in France. But I kind of want to take a shot at trying to keep it alive. All right, let's handle the actual attacks. I declare them all first. Bunk, bunk, right? The 3 hexes I'm attacking. And, well, I don't have much choice here. Let's do the Panzer Army Africa because it's the easiest. I've got 10 strength points coming in. The 8th Army gets its defensive fire. Let's take a look at it. It's got essentially 4 points. There's no air element for the German, so I just roll on the 4 firepower table. And I cause a hit to the Panzer Army Africa, allowing me to get a 6 or a 9 over here. There's a possibility this leader just died. He did not. So now he gets to make his attacks, and I flip him over, and hey, I got Rommel there. Okay, so I've got 9 strength points firing at a -1. I only get a 5, so I only do 2 hits to the 8th Army. And we're going to take that as an infantry and an armor. I can't take air losses on that. Air doesn't hold ground. And now I have an advance opportunity against a 0 hex. No, not against the 0 hex. I didn't wipe it out. Against a 1 hex. So I've got no mechs against a 1. That can't succeed even though I've got Rommel there. So that attack's been finished. I'm going to go with the 4th Army next because even though I want the South up there to attack the 3rd Army perhaps, I can't guarantee that it's going to get up there. This is a problem because if I always screw this up. If I advance with the 4th Army here, it doesn't get in there. So I'm going to actually swap these. I know this is kind of cheating, but I haven't rolled any dice yet this time. So the South Army is going to attack first in order to loosen things up. Now the question is, does the 3rd Army want to shoot the South Army, or does it just want to take that hit? This is tough because I know the 4th Army is going to roll up through me, but I may be weaker, so weak that I can't do anything. And the South Army may be able to make it up if I don't shoot it. So I'm going to take my shot at them. I guess I wasn't able to find another leader there. 9, 16, 17 now, because the USA is not in the game yet. So I've got 7 strength points. I'm firing into the mountain. I don't believe that has any effect. Let's look to see if I can find terrain effects. Its only effect is it may not assault a mountain hex, so I only have 6 strength points because I had a tank there stupidly. But it's no advance attempt, so I'm just going to be rolling on the 6 firepower table against the South Army. A 4 means I get a hit. That means I have to make a leader loss check. No. That hit, of course, comes off in an infantry. Always take your losses on infantry under almost any circumstances. It's like Axis and Allies there. And now the South Army gets to attack back, and I've got 9 strength points there and no leader. This is not mountainous terrain. I get a lousy roll, so I only do 2 hits on the French army. And it's up to 4. I get to make my advance now. I'm going to take it just because let's see if I can make the hex. If I can, I don't know how much that really does me, but I have 5 armor against 5 defensive strength, and I really didn't need any armor here because of this. I should have used the armor in the Panzer Army Africa. Instead it's the Foot Army Africa. 5 armor against 5 defense. I'm not going to get a chance to advance. So I screwed up there anyhow. Now the 4th Army has 8 armor. I get to reveal the leader. There isn't one. Going into the mountains in a friendly hex, I get there on a 1 through 9. The mountains drops 2, 1 through 7. That works. Now I get to launch my second attack. The 4th Army is going to indeed attack. First, I get my air power. I've got 5 air power. No, they have no air. Okay. I thought I had air over there. So I've got 15 strength points against them. No bonuses. First on the 10 table, I do 2. And now on the 5 table, okay, I've done a total of 3 hits on them. Drop some down. If I pulled the right counter, and to only 2 strength points. So now I've got 8 armor against 2 strength points as a 1 to 7. I lose 1 because I advanced last time. I've already advanced once. Yeah, this is the second action for these forces. This isn't going to get one. This south isn't going to get one either. So, what did I say I had? I have 8 armor against 2. That's a 1 through 7. Minus 1 puts me to 1 to 6. It retreats. And I get to advance into here, devastating the hex, of course. And I've also got a control marker there if I need it. Now, I've got air in there, and that air is enough to wipe out the rest of the Third Army. So the French army is actually gone. But I've still got to deal with 1 point defenses on these hexes. So now I've got 8 armor. I've used 2. I need a 1 through 8. 1 through 6 gets me into that hex, because I've used 2, but now I'm on a 1 through 5 to get into the capital itself. And I make it. France has just fallen, which means everything in France has just been devastated. All the armies, all the forts, all that's going to be destroyed. I'll come back in a moment after I've resolved all that. Shit, I cheated. The Mediterranean Sea, I'm only allowed to move 2 strength points per turn there. I moved hordes in there. Something like 8. I'm going to let it stand. I'm going to just say that they slipped in there. It's totally illegal. It's why you can't do what I just did. Now, conceivably, I could have thrown armor and stuff in, but I'm always forgetting stuff like that. Let's just say the Italians managed to slip a bunch of troops in and leave it as be, because trying to fix it is too much of a pain. So far, I have 25 points. I've spent 12 of them here on building up my OKW. When I looked at things, 4 strength points just ain't enough. The Russians have a pretty good chance of winning the game at this point. Now that France is gone, the Allies only have 16 production points in play. The Russians, sure, it only looks like 9, but if you add up everything in Russia, they actually would get at least a substantial victory off that. And if you throw Siberia in, I think they get the... I think they end up getting the decisive victory. So I do have to really worry about a Russian attack at this point. So I built up that big army, but now I have a bunch more points, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them. Having found out that I cheated kind of sucks. Okay, so I went forward, built up a couple of production sites. That's kind of the leftovers I always use for that. I'm not building my armor or anything else in the quantities that I really want. It's always a hard judgment of what to buy here. I bought myself a bunch of tech, though: bombers, TAC, air, mech. I could advance them all as much as I like, and U-boats, which are slower growing. One of the things to do is to make some early rolls on some of these things to see if they pay off. I probably should have rolled early on the bombers to see if I could get somewhere with them. Currently, bombers... No, I'm not affected by this. I have to remember there's that tech thing. If you're in the prohibited levels, you don't get an advantage from other people, I think. If I recall correctly. There's so much little stuff in this game. It's tech and... yeah. Research special cases. Yeah. So I'm not influenced at all by that, as I read it. I could have spent some of the extra points making mechs instead of infantry, which is always a good idea. Infantry is so useless, and I'm like buying it. I figured 6 is what I needed, but I had enough points I could have thrown those into mechs, preparing myself for the Barbarossa. However, there is the possibility of taking Denmark, maybe Norway and or Sweden. Yugoslavia, Greece, stuff like that. Why do you want to take things? Part of it's for the economic benefit. If you get the control of these, you can boost your production, but it costs you to do that. More importantly is the morale benefit. For the Germans, they got to keep their morale shooting up, or else they'll be taken down through losses that they take later. I just gained 6 hexes this turn with France or more, so I get a morale point off that. I am going to roll on a lot of these effects though. Let's start with the bombers. I get a 3, so I make a level in bomber. I go from P0 up to the 7 cost, which is the same as the Allies have. The problem with this, of course, is now I'm making it so that the Allies can build bombers more easily. If I look at the bomber chart, I want to get it down another one at least before I start building them probably. Although, it may be worth buying them as long as the Brits don't have any defenses, even at high price, to devastate their production. Let's keep going with TAC Air. That's successful, so I get my cost of TAC Air down from 3, and each chart is a little different, down to 2. That's a nice cheap price, and that's one of the reasons maybe you don't want to buy military units early on, is they start getting much cheaper as you go. Mechs, same thing. Oh, I got a 6. That meant I failed at my research. Now, I didn't explain this, but there's a research failure chart somewhere. Efficiency. I roll on here to see what happens to my marker. I don't lose all the spaces. I lose 2 spaces, which isn't so terrible. If you lose all of them, it sucks. And then I'm going to also roll for U-boats, because I got to get the U-boats down, and it's worth taking a risk on them. If I can't get them, you know, they're not a necessary part of my strategy, which is to say, if they don't get cheap enough, I may just not build them. And I get a 3, which is a full success on U-boats. So that goes back to the beginning, and I look to see, we're at 6, we go down to 4. You can see they get really, really cheap as you go, just like the bombers and everything else. So you want to kind of focus on being able, you know, to get your stuff cheaply. As it gets cheaper and cheaper, and you're increasing your production, Germany can turn into a monster in this game. Notice one thing. This is still an Allied hex. It's out of supply, though. It doesn't have a production site, which means if the Allies can't connect to that next turn, by the end of their combat phase, this will disappear and become German, and everything in it is destroyed at that point, including the fort. All right. We move up to the Russians. One thing I want to point out for everybody, really, but right now it's very obvious for the Soviets. You're always making this trade-off between buying tech, which will lower the price that you eventually pay on all your units, and buying the units themselves. So if the Soviets choose not to buy any units this turn, and they don't have much else to do except buy, unless they wanted to make their stab at Germany. If they're not buying any units this turn, then what they're going to end up doing is they're kind of gambling and saying, well, I don't think the Germans are ready. Now, the Germans with only 13 armor probably aren't ready to take out the Soviet Union. They could take a big swath of it, though, even with just that, just because there's nothing out there to prevent them. So basically, the Soviets can't get any supply by sea through the Baltic. So the Germans could steam up here with their tanks, and then maybe steam over down here. They can make quite a few hexes as long as they're not facing more than a garrison, right? A 1-point garrison. You know, it takes 7 or 8 armor to make a few hexes in that. I've got a pretty good chance of cutting everything off, and that would be the majority of the Russian army, which shouldn't be that far forward probably. I should be pulling it back if I'm going to be not building a lot of it up, because I don't want to get pocketed. It's better to just let the Germans have the territory. So the Soviets spend most of their limited points on technology, not making their rolls yet. They don't really want to make things easier for the Germans at this point. These aren't terribly great roll chances. Why take odds risks? if, you know, I don't know, getting infantry, etc. is valuable, but I'd rather improve my chances. I only have 50-50 of success at best. And that's on the tack air. Everything else is just 1/3. I'd rather wait. And then I built an additional tack air because I had 3 extra points. What do I want to throw them into? You know, I mean, most of this stuff I don't want to buy. Most of it's totally uninteresting to the Soviets. Whereas getting, you know, my ground army up to highest tech is good. Air Force, fine. You know, I don't want to waste a point and buy an infantry instead of a tack air. Tack air is definitely better. It doesn't count against stacking, all that kind of crap. So now we're on to really almost the end of this turn. We're on the Allied phase. This is going to be some hard thinking because the Allies have to make their decision how they're going to stand, especially since I cheated and slipped all those infantry into the Panzer Army Africa. What does that mean? Well, it actually gives an opportunity to cut all that infantry off, which is one reason why, you know, I didn't view that cheating as that potent an effect. But I've got other things to worry about. I've got the possibility of, you know, having to worry about the U-boat prices are coming down. And then also the Germans obviously are going to have the ability to build bombers now. Do I start building air defense at this point? Do I start worrying about the Germans perhaps preparing for an invasion, so I need to build more troops? If I build more troops, well, the 8th Army is not very potent right now. All it's got is 1 armor in it, so it's not going to be able to cut the Panzer Army Africa off. I don't have the troops in Britain, because of everything I lost, to enable me to do, you know, an attempt to cut that thing off. I'm really running into troubles because of this cheat I did here. I was only allowed to move 2. I should be at like 3 strength points here. You know, the attack would have never happened, but I'm going to downgrade this. That gives me 6. That's the cost of this infantry here. I don't know what to do with that. Instead, what I'm going to, or 6 extra strength points. That's all this infantry. Instead of building all this infantry, I'm going to put this in the OKW. I'm going to say I built half as much armor and put that up here. I think that gives me a more reasonable positioning. Hey, I got a little bit of a cheat being able to shoot up the 8th Army. I may have an advantage that allows me to get into the Red Sea, but I'm just not seeing how the Allies can hold out against that huge army. It's going to grind them down, and I can't allow that to stand like it is. And to some extent, you could say, well, you wouldn't have built as much infantry, you'd have 6 more points. I don't want to go back too much. I've given myself a little advantage here, a little disadvantage with that. I'm good. We'll leave it as it stands. So now the problem is the Allies have nothing they can throw in here because I sent everything out of Great Britain. By the way, this isn't in port. This is sailing so that it can intercept things if I try to get out. Now to wind things up for the Allies, I bought myself some tech. I'm leaving the air defense here. I'm not going to roll on that yet because the Germans haven't built anything. But here's the problem. If I don't build this, they can start bombing me. So yeah, I'm going to roll on that. I also built some infantry here. The reason being I want to try to defend my Mediterranean holdings in case that keeps being, in case pressure keeps being put there. So air defense, I get a 5. That's a B. God knows what that does, because currently air defense is at 8. I think it goes to like 7.5, which is crappy. And this is why this is a bad result. This is actually a worse result than an ultimate failure. Is because B's send you all the way to, oh wait, does it go down? Yeah, it goes down to 7 next. B's are a problem because they send you all the way back to the beginning. So my air defense now has to build itself up to get to a better rating. If I had gotten a complete failure, I might still be at this position and be able to roll again. Tack air, yeah, I'm going to roll for that. I want to see if I can reduce the cost of that. I get a 3, that's going to go down. That goes down to a 3. I need to get that. And the mechs, do I want a 50-50 chance of improving my mech cost? Well, I don't know if I'm even willing to buy them at $4 each. That's a high cost when I only have 16 production. I'm going to make a roll on that as well. And I get the bonus there, which is cool. Sometimes your rolls help determine what you're going to build. You know, if I get to 5 points here, like I did with the air defense, getting a B result, well, that couldn't happen with mechs. But if I got like a B result and got thrown back down, well, that's better. I'm not going to be able to get a good result off of the next reduction. I'll only be able to get a 1 point difference, which, say if this had hit 5 somehow, I would only be able to go down to a 4. I'm going to need air defense, though, if the Germans are building bombers. And that's, you know, the fact that they're concentrating and actually have bomber production now, I feel like I have to get the air defense started, because next turn the Germans could build bombers, and then I can build some air defense to try to start knocking them down. That's just how I tend to look at things there. I guess that's it for this turn, except we lose this. And you know, with my production so much lower than the Germans, trying to rely on building partisans or something like that, that's not going to work terribly well for me. There's also no place that it's really appealing to build partisans. I could build them in France, and that could actually be a pain in the ass to the Germans, but they haven't built that supply. They haven't started building the production capability out of there. You'll see that Vichy does not end up as Vichy. I'm going to be allowed 4 points. Well, where am I going to build them? Almost certainly I'm going to build them on the interior, because those are less easily messed with. But I may not want to build Paris up to 2. I may only want to build it to 1, and then I have a choice. Do I want more of France here in the Mediterranean? One thing to note, I have control of all of France, which means I don't need to build these up to be able to bomb Britain from France, or to be able to stage ships there. So, you know, it's so abstracted that you end up with, again, like in many places in this game, some kind of goofy stuff that's hard to explain. All right, so we'll push into the winter. And of course, we don't want to launch an attack on Russia in the winter. But we may want to prepare for, and these extra armor help, launching an attack in the spring of 41. There's some advantages to doing that, of course. There's also advantages to holding off, though, in that the Russians may have a harder time, and there's some tasty stuff available, things like Yugoslavia, the Nordic territories, that I can get a morale boost off of. Morale boosts are important, of course.